you want something for inshore fishing where you can, do a couple different applications, target different species. And so the first thing is the rod. And so I just kind of want to ask Simon, if someone comes into Hadrill's Point Tackle and says, hook me up with some sort of rod that I can target the main species doing inshore fishing. Simon, what would you do?
So in my hand, I have our most popular rod that we have in-house. It's a 7-foot medium fast rod, and a medium fast rod typically notates that middle of the road. Medium meaning it's a 6 to 12. Occasionally you'll see a line rating of approximately 15. And that's not what size fish you can catch. That's just contributing what size line that you're going to have on this reel. It's a 2,000 to 3,000 size reel. It just so happens I've got a Stratic in my hand. It's a fantastic reel. We carry reels from Penn, Shimano, and Daiwa. All great choices, but you're fishing a 2,500 or 3,000, which is not tiny, not huge. It's dead center of the road. And on the rod, a 7-foot medium fast. This just so happens to be a St. Croix Triumph.
All right, thank you. Simon sort of mentioned it here, the size of the reel. I've got it pictured here. There's really two main types of reels for inshore fishing. You've got your spinning gear, and then you've got your conventional or bait casting gear. There's some really good advantages, and I use both. I use bait casters in certain situations. They're really efficient fish fighting machines. They're great at throwing heavier plugs or trying to throw things under docks. But for the most part, I think Simon would agree with me, around Charleston and coastal South Carolina, I should say, we see that the vast majority of people are gonna fish with spinning gear, basically. So Simon mentioned, 2,500, 3,000 size series of reels. Let's talk about line. We've got really two main choices when it comes to your main line. You've got monofilament and braided line. And I can say probably, I jumped on that braid wagon probably back in the late 90s, and that's about all I use, except for a few certain applications. But Simon, could you give us just a little tutorial on why you might fish braid versus mono, or vice versa, the pros and cons of each of those?
So braid's absolutely taken the market. I know in the past 10 years it's absolutely hammered it. I would say if we spool a spinning reel in Hadrill's, probably 90% of the time it's braid's going on it. And the advantages of braid is it's thinner diameter. In my hand, I'm holding some Diamond 10-pound. It's absolutely tiny. It's super, super thin. 10-pound braid has the same mono diameter as 2-pound mono. Braid has zero stretch. If a fish bites it, you're going to feel it immediately. Where if you're holding some mono, it has elasticity to it. It's super stretchy, so it's not immediate reaction. A lot of times that's why people use mono as leader to provide a little bit of stretch. But typically your diameter is one of your big hitting points, enables you to put more line on the reel. And I know we mentioned reel size a minute ago. 10 years ago, a lot of 4,000 size reels were being fished because mono was so large and you wanted 20-pound line. Well, you can put 20-pound line basically on any reel now and still hold 100, 200, 300 yards in that capacity. But braid, zero stretch, super, super thin. Mono, really stretchy, and each one has its own specific applications. But most of the time I'm enjoying braid. All the reels behind you, they've got braid on them.
That makes sense. And if you need more than 150 yards of line on your inshore rod, then something bad has happened and you're probably not going to land that fish. But so I'm just going to go ahead and jump on to the next one. So what I want to do is the first few of these, I want to talk about some rigs that you would use for natural baits or live baits. And the first of those would be the Carolina rig. This one is really sort of an old standard. Let's see if I can pull it up. This is an exaggeratedly large setup here so that you guys can see this. I wouldn't recommend using 8/0 hooks and 6-ounce lead inshore. But your basic Carolina rig is going to be your hook going through your leader, which is going to be tied on to a swivel here. And then above that, you're going to thread on your weight And I like to put a piece of bead on here. You don't have to do that. That's not necessary. That bead can kind of protect your knot a little bit as this bangs up and down on it. And what that Carolina rig can do is it's going to fish on the bottom. A lot of people fish this passively. Let's say you were setting up somewhere, you're anchored, you're putting a couple lines out, may put a couple Carolina rigs out and put those in the rod holders. And that's why on the bottom right here, I mentioned circle hooks. If you're going to be fishing something passively, sticking in the rod holder, makes all the sense in the world to put a circle hook on that. You're going to catch more fish. That circle hook's going to catch right in the corner of the fish's mouth, and you're a lot less likely to gut hook that fish or catch it in the throat. And then even beyond circle hooks, you know, what we would recommend is what we would call a non-offset circle hook. So you can see in the picture here, an offset circle hook sort of bends off to the side there. A non-offset, the point of the hook is in line with the shank and the eye. And what that means is that it's less likely for it to gut hook that fish as it's coming out. It's more likely to catch right in the corner of the mouth. So Carolina rig is just a, you know, everyone needs to have that in their arsenal. And it's definitely a way, you don't have to fish it passively, but it's a good way to, if you're going to fish something passively on the bottom. Let's go to the next one. So the next one would be the popping cork rig. And so obviously this one, as opposed to that Carolina rig, which you're fishing on the bottom, the popping cork is designed to keep that bait a little bit up off the bottom. Again, I've got an exaggerated size rig here. But all your popping corks they're going to come in all different colors and shapes and sizes, but all of them have a few things in common. These are fixed popping corks here, or float rigs. They all tend to have some beads, so that this, you know, when you give this some action, it makes sort of a clacking noise. It's going to attract fish to come in. One thing you'll see is that almost all of them have some sort of brass weights or a lead weight here. You always want to tie your leader onto that on the side that has the weights. And the reason for that is you want that rig to sit up so that you can see it. If you tie it the opposite way, the rig's going to sit funny in the water. You're not going to be able to see it. It's not going to fish effectively. So typically, popping cork to a leader, you know, for inshore, either, you know, I prefer fluorocarbon most of the time, 20-pound fluorocarbon, 20-pound mono. You could go, if you're fishing this actively, you've got it in your hand, and you're not just setting it in a rod holder, circle hook or a J hook's fine, depending on what you're doing. And then you want to have, you know, normally a piece of split shot up above that that's going to let that bait sit a little bit below the surface. And so, Simon, can you kind of give us an idea of what situations would you use a popping cork, and you know, what sort of targets and what baits would you be using?
Yeah, and I'm going to go a little bit on a tangent because you mentioned the Carolina rig. Carolina rig, it holds you straight to the bottom. You can pick your weight. You can go from a 1 ounce to a 3 ounce. I don't typically fish heavy inshore at all. I tell people if I've got to fish 2 ounces or more, I go home for the day, or I switch spots, kind of protect a little bit. But your Carolina rig you're on the bottom for sure. It holds to the bottom really, really tight. So if you're breaking off a whole lot, that's where your opportunity comes in line to switch up to a popping cork. I don't leave my bait in place a whole lot. I know a lot of people that dock fish, you'll put a chunk of mullet, a whole finger mullet, and you'll just let it set underneath the dock. I don't like letting it sit. I like reeling it back to me. And that covers from me to the dock, and that covers one plane. One cool thing about a popping cork is, if you're getting hung up a whole bunch, you can float over those oysters or structure. If you don't have structure, you don't have fish, guys. That's just necessary. But if you're getting hung up a whole lot with your Carolina rig, then you're going to switch up to your popping cork. And what that's going to do is float your bait over top. I'm going to answer someone's question I just noticed, and it's easy to cover. You're asking about a leader or a leader length on your Carolina rig. I personally like 12 to 18 inches. I don't know what Matt likes. Some of those questions are just easier to pop out. And Matt also
in that range.
Matt also mentioned fluorocarbon. Some people may not know what fluorocarbon is. This is the line I've been using. We have about 4 different varieties on the shelf. Fluorocarbon dissipates UV rays so the fish can't see it. I don't know if the fish can see it or not because they won't talk to me when I catch them. But that's all I use, and I've been super happy with using it. And this is one, and this is Diamond. We have about 3 or 4 different ones in the shop that work fantastic. But popping corks just help you cover a different range.
And just a note on that fluorocarbon too, it's got a little bit more abrasion resistance too, and some stiffness. So a lot of advantages. It's a little more expensive, but for all the expenses of fishing, it's probably one of those that's worth it. I think Joey, do we have any other questions so far that you want to throw out, or we want to keep going?
Yeah, so there was a few questions. I think I answered most of them. Yes, I answered most of them, but a few that I have not gotten to is, why would you use a split shot on the leader of the popping cork?
If you were to say throw a live shrimp out with a popping cork and you don't have that split shot, a lot of times that shrimp is just going to sit on the surface. The current's going to take it up on the surface. For me, at least, it gets it just a little bit under the surface. And a lot of times you're putting on a long enough leader. You may be fishing in 3 feet of water and you have 2 feet of leader, and you want that shrimp kind of moving along, not on the bottom, but just above the bottom. So depending on the application, that split shot's going to get that bait down just a little bit so that it's not just held up in the current on the surface of the water.
Okay. And then another question, where did it go? The rest of these I can pretty much answer via text. Someone was wondering how long of a leader on the popping cork you would use. And I mean, that's pretty much depends on where you're fishing. At what, to spend yourself at the point of the water that you want to fish at.
Yes, jump in there at all?
Yeah, on the popping cork, I usually fish longer versus shorter. The cool thing about the split shot is if you fish it halfway in between, it holds your bait down, but it still enables them to swim in and out of the oyster beds. So I'm fishing 3 to 4 feet regularly, and we talked about rods and reels and everything. When I'm throwing a popping cork, I love a 7'6" rod. Still the medium fast. Medium fast is what we do across the board. I saw somebody was asking about medium fast. It just refers to the response time of the rod and how quick it comes back to the starting point. But popping cork, 3 to 4 foot leader, 2/0 circle hook underneath.
All right, let's move on. The next one, this is one that's kind of near and dear to me, and this kind of goes along with what Simon was mentioning before. Is, I also rarely fish a bait statically. So the jig head and live bait combination, I've probably caught more flounder with this rig than anything else. This is a hilariously large version of what you'd be using. But essentially what you're talking about here is just a jig head, and I like to tie a loop knot on, but any knot that you're comfortable with. This is a lefty carré loop. Just gives it a little bit more action to wiggle around. If you're comfortable with a uni knot or whatever you're comfortable with. But then I'm going to run my fluorocarbon leader. I typically fish about 2 feet of leader on here, and then I'm going to tie that directly to my braided line. This is a uni to uni knot. Really good knot for connecting braided line to fluorocarbon or to mono. If you're feeling crazy, learn the FG knot. That's an even better knot for connecting a braid to mono. But no swivel here, just a direct connection. And the reason you would fish this is something that you're going to fish on the bottom, but you're fishing it actively. So let's say I'm fishing around a dock with a mud minnow or a 4 to 5 inch mullet. I can sort of bounce that bait along slowly, or say I'm at the jetties with a little bit heavier weight. I can work that along the rocks actively, cover some ground. You're a little less likely to hang up than you would be with that Carolina rig. You have a very direct connection to the hook itself. You can feel bites a little bit better. So just a rig that I really like, and it's really effective on flounder, but you catch red drum with it, you catch sea trout. I think an all-around good rig for fishing a live bait. So that's the jig head and the minnow. Simon, any thoughts there?
Or were we going to chat about the split shot rig before or after the on the?
We'll talk about it. Well, I'll ask you about that here in a moment.
Okay. Okay.
So this next one is not really actually something that you would necessarily fish to catch the big three that I'm talking about, the flounder, the sea trout, and the red drum. But the reason I wanted to include this is that if you fish at all with kids, you need to have a double dropper rig on your boat. And anybody who's got kids understands sometimes they can have very short attention spans. And so you want to put something in their hands that's going to be effective and it's going to get a tug on that line fairly quickly. This double dropper rig, you can buy these pre-made. You can learn how to tie a couple dropper loops with, say, 30-pound monofilament, tie your own, put some very small circle hooks on there. But this is just a super effective rig to put in a kid's hand or in your hand if you just want to get a tug on the line. And so, Simon, if you had someone coming in that said, I just want my kids to catch something, and you gave them a double drop, what would you have them bait that up with?
So we get this question all the time, probably 20 times a day at the tackle shop. I'm taking my kids fishing. I want to catch fish. Shrimp's always great, but the catch with shrimp is it's frozen. You probably got to have a cooler. You're throwing it away at the end of the day. If you have kids and want to catch fish, do yourself a favor. There's these things called fish bites. We have a whole end cap of them in the shop. It's non-perishable. You don't have to refrigerate it. Reminds me of like bubble tape that I used to have when I was younger, but I'm not eating this, the fish are. But you cut these into chunks and it's woven. It's not Kevlar, but it holds onto the hook great. It lasts forever. It's all the whiting, pinfish, all the fun stuff the kids need to catch to have fun, and so you can stay out there longer. Fish bites are the way to go, and small J hooks be the way to route that.
Yeah, small J's, small circles, either way, and works great in the surf too. Those fish bites are great. So now, before I get into the artificials, I just wanted to ask Simon, are there any rigs, you mentioned a split shot rig that you would say that we haven't covered for live or artificial baits?
Yeah, 100%. So we talked about the Carolina rigs. We talked about the popping cork rigs. One thing I never go fishing without is a split shot rig. And literally what we're going to do is we're going to tie that fluorocarbon, 20 or 15 pound I use regularly inshore. I'll connect that to my braid with a uni or what's called a triple surgeons. You can write that down and watch a YouTube video, show you how to tie those effectively. I'll fish a 2/0 circle hook and I'll literally put a split shot right above my hook. And we were talking about actively retrieving stuff. This enables you to actively fish a finger mullet and you don't miss a bite. You feel it all. But the split shot rig is my go-to. I will flip. Kevin asked a question in reference to using pre-tied Carolina rigs. I understand the pre-tied ones are quick. I don't use a whole lot of wire Carolina rigs because I saw that you saw some that the hook was already attached. I put these behind me. We sell a ton of these in the shop. It's a ghost leader. It's fluorocarbon attached to a circle hook with a swivel on the other end. All you do is add the egg sinker. This is the way to go if you need something pre-tied. You're only tying one knot, same as if you were buying a wire one. Not that the wire ones don't work. I just prefer these because they're fluorocarbon. I just wanted to grab that question, that's all.
Sure. Would you also recommend those people are learning, at least I would say, go ahead and learn how to tie your knots, get your hooks, get your swivels, and get some fluorocarbon, and you can tie up a lot of rigs. And you can adjust them to the situation and to the size leader that you need and everything else. It's really worth just going ahead and knowing how to do your own rigging at some point.
You want me to, somebody just asked about the fish bites being for kids.
Sure.
They're for adults too. All my surf fishermen buy them. They're just super, super easy to use. They're not perishable, and they stay on the hook really, really, really well. So it's a whole lot easier for a parent to bait a hook, or if you're going shark fishing and you need bigger bait, that would be how I would recommend about the fish bite. So Sheila, if that answers your question.
On top of the fish bites thing, I even use those sometimes if you're using something like a piece of fresh shrimp. You can use a tiny piece of fish bites in front of it and behind it, and it'll actually make that shrimp stay on the hook a little bit better too. So
shrimp kebab.
You can do a whole lot with those. So let's move on to artificials. Well, actually, let me ask Joey first. Do we have anything that we need to answer before we get into the artificial world?
Before we jump into the artificial world, we've had Mr. Ken has asked about the applications of the inshore rigging to surf fishing.
You want me to run and grab something for that, Matt? Or
I mean, yeah, if you want to answer that, that's fine.
yeah, go ahead and answer another question. I'll grab something off the shelf and kind of for a fish finder rig so people have an idea what that is.
Okay. Yeah, Simon's going to mention a fish finder. It's very similar in concept to a Carolina rig in that it's going to have a sliding sinker and it's going to stay on the bottom. What a fish finder is going to let you do is it's going to have a clip where you can remove that weight easily and change weights, basically. So very similar idea. In certain places, you can surf fish just fine with if you're, say, flounder fishing with an egg sinker and a Carolina rig. But this fish finder rig that Simon's going to show you is a good way to surf fish. And you can really, a fish finder, you can fish anything from very small stuff with a 1 ounce pyramid sinker all the way up to fishing for big bull drum with a much heavier weight. Although now we actually do recommend a fixed weight on our bull red drum rigs. So Simon.
So we're going over the Carolina rig comparison to the fish finder rig. Your Carolina rig is a fish finder rig if you just simply substitute out that egg sinker for what's called a fish finder. It's super simple, and basically this little plastic part is going to slide over your braid or your mono, and it's going to be stopped by the swivel. And what that enables you to do is to switch your leads out on the fly. Just a super easy way to turn a Carolina rig into a surf rig. And we do have larger weights called Sputnik weights that hold really well for that. But that would be a transition from your Carolina rig to your fish finder rig.
Yeah, fish finder rig, same sort of rig that I use bottom fishing as well. So you can scale that all the way up with the benefit that at the end of the day, instead of having to cut that lead weight out on a Carolina rig, you just pop it right off with your fish finder rig, which is a really nice thing to be able to do. Anything else, Joey?
Yes, just briefly. What is the correct way to rig a dead shrimp to a hook?
I'll let you take that, Simon. I don't know that I would say there's a correct way on a dead shrimp.
I don't think there's a correct way to rig a dead shrimp. Now, if you ask me how to rig a live shrimp, I like rigging a live shrimp two different ways.
Two different good ways, yeah.
Through the horn underneath the popping cork or through the tail if it's on the bottom. But I think if it's dead, I think you just throw a hook in and go fishing. I would probably avoid the top part of its head if it's a heads on, because that does come off really easy once they're froze. But I would probably go through the tail. That would be Simon's right way to do it.
Yeah, I will. If you're fishing a lot of dead shrimp and you do that often, I would very much recommend that you look into salting your baits. That's a way that you can actually take a fresh shrimp, peel it. If you're going surf fishing, cake it in salt a couple days ahead, pour the moisture off of it. You've got something that fishes about as good as fresh shrimp and has the consistency of rubber, so you're not going to lose those baits every time. So you've never tried salting baits, it's a game changer, definitely, and I would look that up.
Okay, and then real quickly, question about jig heads. In what applications would you use what colors and what sizes of jig heads?
Well, we're going to get into that in just a moment here when we jump in. Simon's going to run through a couple different types of jig heads when we talk about artificial. So if we can just hold that for a moment.
Okay. Matt, I see one question that would be super quick to answer.
Sure.
Is somebody just asked what was the product after the fish bites? I'm assuming it was the ghost leaders. Owner makes these. They range in a variety. They do J hooks. J hooks are great for sheephead. That's probably a whole nother webinar Matt's gonna have to contract us out for.
Absolutely.
But circle hooks across the board on these, they start in a 2. They go to like a 5/0. They do these things really big. Every spectrum of inshore fishing. super simple way to have a pre-tied Carolina rig. All you do is add the weight, tie to the top of the swivel, pops out of the hook, and you're ready to go fishing. And this is also a great way if you're starting. I usually get somebody a pack of these and then give them fluorocarbon hooks and swivels so they can tie their own, but at least they got a place to start with them. But
there you go.
by owner.
All right. We want to move on to some artificials then. So the first thing we're just going to talk about is we're really only going to cover a couple types of artificials for this inshore saltwater fishing. The one that's the most prominent is going to be your soft plastics. And those are typically, you know, there's a million different styles of soft plastic baits. They can be rigged on a jig head, which if we haven't explained, a jig head is just a hook with a weighted head to it, basically. So they can be rigged on, there you go, rigged on jig heads. They can be rigged on hooks without a lot of weight on them. Simon, could you just sort of give us a little example of some different soft plastics that you think are effective around here, and maybe how you would rig them up?
Yeah, for sure. We can cover that. So a couple of different options. Directly on the top of this PowerPoint Matt's got listed, that's a 3-inch swim bait. 3-inch swim baits are fantastic. It enables somebody to reel really slow and get all the action without having to work the rod. My favorite bait personally is what's called a jerkbait. This just so happens to be a Z-Man bait. We're super lucky to have these guys local in Charleston. And I pair these, this is the 375 Streak Z in Pearl. If you ask me what color, if I have to pick a color to throw all the time, it's going to be pearl. I rigged that. I did hold this up. This is also another local product. This is the Trout Eye Jig Head, and the Trout Eye Jig Head pairs fantastic to the 375 Streak Zs. That's one bait that I fish quite often. They pair up perfect to each other, just like so. That's a 375 Streak Z. That would be number one. My other bait that I would recommend is a Gulp Shrimp. I've had people ask me why these work, and you throw them on the floor. You don't have to do anything. You just leave them sitting there. And Gulp Shrimp, I think New Penny, if I'm not mistaken, is their #1 SKU in the world.
It's my favorite.
And I would rig one of these, but I'm not because it smells really, really bad. If you come and buy it, I'll rig it for you. And then a Gamakatsu gumball jig head is my way to rig it. I don't like putting them on a jig head that has eyes because shrimp don't have 2 sets of eyes. It's just a personal opinion of mine. And I'll pop back to the Streak Z really quick. One thing I do with my Z-Man baits is I add Procure to it. All Z-Man baits are porous. They're super stretchy, and that's what's great about them. They don't rip. If you're throwing an artificial, Z-Man probably should be one of them. But I use this Procure. They've got a range of flavors: mullet, shrimp, blue crab. I think they all smell the same, but I just grab mullet off the shelf. And you just add these to the baits. It gives that little bit of extra bite. I don't think trout rely on the bite as much for the scent, but redfish and flounder, I think it makes a difference. So 375 Streak Z would be my #1. #2, Gulp Shrimp.
Hey Simon, for somebody who's never rigged up one of those jerk baits on a hook before, could you just kind of run that through for them real quick?
Yeah, I can. I rigged that thing without even thinking about it. So I've got my hook, and then I've got my jerk bait. I'm going to line up where I want that to come out of that jerk bait, and that's going to be an imaginary spot. It's not in the bait yet. So I'm going to see where that's going to come out, and I'm going to run it through the top, and I'm going to come down to that imaginary spot where I want that to pop out at. And with Z-Man, I'm going to pull it down on the hook versus pushing it on the hook. Regular plastics, you can just push it on the hook and it'll be just fine. But with Z-Man, how stretchy it is, you got to pull it down on the hook. And that's good to go fishing. Matt's going to come up and pick me up after this, and we're going to go fishing. We're going to catch
That's
that
right.
night
That's
bite.
right. And so how would you fish a bait like that? Are you swimming that along? Are you bouncing it slowly on the bottom?
You know, I'm a super slow retrieve, and I know we talked about rods and medium fast and other. We just contain that medium fast. My favorite rod. What, I had it over here. Oh, I do actually. This is a medium light rod, which is a super light. Somebody talked about size reels and such. Just so happens to be a St. Croix Legend Elite. The medium lights are the way I like to fish. This is another bait a lot like this one, just a touch smaller. But it helps me control the feel of the bite. Super light rod, and I'm going to cast it and just on the jerk shot, I'm going to give an ever so slight just lift off the bottom and let it fall. And I also fish a 1,000 size spinning reel on that because it slows down my retrieve. The cooler the water temperatures are, the lighter that bite will be. I love going out and catching trout. We've had days where we catch 50 to 75 and even more than that sometimes on just crazy little baits like this, and you never change it because it's a Z-Man and it just stays on the hook for a while.
Lasts forever. All right. Joe, any questions about soft plastics before we move on to some hard baits?
Just give me a second here to sift through
Sure.
everything. So there was one question asking about rigging your soft plastics. So can we run through the rigging from the plastic to the hook to the leader to your main line?
You want that, Matt? You may knock it out.
No, you got it in your hand. Go for it.
Okay, so I'm going to start from the top to the bottom. When we're talking about rigging, like I said, this is my personal preference. You can throw artificials on a 2,500 or 3,000 size reel. The catch is you're going to have to lighten up your braid. On my 1,000, this is a Stradic CI4. It's got 8-pound braid on it. Super, super light, but the reel doesn't put out that much drag, so I don't have to worry about breaking the line. From my 10-pound, I'm going to go to a 15-pound fluorocarbon leader. And I'm grabbing out of my tackle box right behind me. This is that diamond stuff. Fish is super great. Attach the exact same knots here. I'm going to use either a a uni to uni, or I'm going to use a triple surgeons. Triple surgeons a little quicker. It's a lot like the uni, just with one less step. And then from there, I'm going to use the loop knot that Matt mentioned earlier. I use a loop knot on fishing all artificials. And then I'm going to come to my jig. This has got a slim swim on it, which is a Z-Man product. This is that 375 Streak Z in pearl, which is fantastic. So 8-pound braid, 15 to 10-pound fluorocarbon, 7-foot light to medium light rod, and a 1,000 size spinning reel.
Did you mention you may have mentioned it and I missed it, but the weight of the jig heads that you're typically fishing, are you 1/8 ounce for the most part, or 1/8 ounce?
They do 8, 3/16, and quarter. I find that whenever I'm throwing my artificials, I'm typically in light water. I don't do a whole lot of deeper artificials. That's where those heavier ones come in. 1/8 or 3/16. If somebody said, "Hey Simon, favorite jig head to fish with," and it sounds cliche because this trout eye is a local product, but Ralph and Dave have done a fantastic job on this, and it'd be a 3/16 or 1/8 ounce trout eye jig head. I don't care what color the eye is.
I'll even jump up. You know, the only time I'll fish heavier is, let's say I'm at the jetties and I'm bouncing something along in some current up there. I may go up to a 3/8 on that sometimes, but I'm with you, somewhere between 1/8 ounce and 1/4 ounce.
One more question real quick, and I really like this question because I've seen people do it both ways, and it's really to the preference of the angler. But when you're rigging an artificial paddle tail, which way should the tail be facing?
That's a Simon question right there. I'm
my question, because I rig them backwards. That's just what I do. Z-Man has a slit in it, and they intend for that slit to be where that hook's ran through. I rig them upside down, and I fill that slit full of Procure. The bait still swims great. I'm trying to even think which way it would make it swim up or down. I literally just go opposite of the slit in the bait. But Matt has that rigged correctly in that presentation. That's how they would say to correctly rig one.
Correctly, but I've fished it both ways. I've looked at both of them in a swimming pool. They're both effective, but yeah, that would be, I guess, technically the way that you're supposed to do it.
I guess I do it upside down too, and I've always thought I've done it right side up. All right.
There was a question about how much leader for jerk baits. I start out with a really, really long leader. That way I know I'm going to break off. If you're fishing in the right spot in the low country, you're going to lose baits. I start with a 4-foot, 3 to 4 foot leader and slowly cut it back, and I won't retie till I've got about 10 or 12 inches left on my line.
And if you're going to do that, you need to make sure that you tie a knot from that braid to to your fluorocarbon that's a pretty slim knot, because that's going to be going sometimes through the eyes. So it's good to make sure you tie a nice slim knot and really cinch it down and cut your tag ends pretty closely there too. You want to talk about hard baits?
Let's talk about them.
Let's do it. So we're not going to get deep into this, but as far as you know, the other thing we want to talk about is plugs. And you really have got two main types. You've got your top water plugs, which is what it sounds like. Those are going to float on the surface. They're going to have that action on the surface. And then you're going to have your sinking or suspending plugs. You know, that sinking plug is going to fall at a little faster rate. Your suspending plug is going to fall slowly and then can be moved along sort of, you know, at a certain depth. Simon, can you tell me a little bit about fishing topwater plugs? You know, what conditions you would find yourself fishing a topwater plug? You know, how you fish them and what's your target?
Yeah, so we'll talk about the perfect day in Charleston for me. Is getting up at 5 a.m. And then we're going to get out there first thing for that early morning topwater bite. Fish will eat topwater all day. I've seen it. We had a noon bite the other day. They were swinging at mullet, and we were like, let's pitch a topwater, and we caught them. But I like that first 30 minutes of sunrise, and I'm not crazy picky, but these two guys, red and white, black and chartreuse, Super Spook Juniors, they catch fish. They don't look like anything, but they work. There's a few other brands. Yozuri makes an awesome one. Shimano just put out the new Colt Sniper 95, which I've been fishing with a little bit. It's great. But the first 30 minutes, we're catching redfish and trout. The redfish are really explosive on them. The trout can be too, but I've seen the redfish blow up. We've caught both on them readily. And then after that first 30 minutes where you'll see an obvious slow in the bite, you'll get that occasional swing versus every time you cast. Then we're going to switch up to those suspending baits. Don't throw this guy in less than 3 feet of water because you will donate him. He's got 6 points to wrap around every oyster in Charleston. But I'm going to switch over, and we're going to work those the exact same way where you're just doing the pop, 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 walk the dog method back to you. You're going to do that exact same thing with this, except it's going to be 3 pops and a stop. And this guy looks just like a menhaden swimming up through the surface. This is a 17 MR mirror lure, 17 MR. Different colors. You know, I want something fishy. I don't fish a whole lot of non-fishy colors when it comes to this, unlike the top waters. But Super Spooks, 17 MRs, I'm ready to go catch some fish that day.
You mentioned walking the dog. Can you just elaborate a little bit more on that action that you, especially on a top water bait, you know, how you want to make that happen?
Yeah, so I point the rod tip down towards the water, and I just do a motion just like this with the rod. It's hard to demonstrate because we're in such a small, close quarters.
Sure.
But it's a cadence that you're going to work. And if you imagine doing the rod tip like this, and you can speed it up, and he's going to dance quicker. I've seen fish react to a quick jerk. I've seen them react to a slow jerk. I've seen them where they'll only hit it when you pause. So I can't say there's a perfect way to work a topwater. I like a medium pace, I guess you would say. I've fished with guys before, and they like erratic, where it doesn't even look like there's no cadence at all. It all catches fish. If they're eating that, they're going to eat a topwater.
Oh, and I would just add to that, you make a good point. You know, start with that medium cadence, and if they want something different, speed it up. If they don't want that, slow it down. Like you mentioned, sometimes you're going to get a lot of those hits when you give it a 2-second pause, 3-second pause right there. So if you're not getting strikes and you think you're in a place with fish, then vary it up, and at some point you're going to trigger that sort of reaction strike, which is ultimately what a topwater bite is a you know. You know, we're getting a reaction strike. It looks like a mullet sort of fleeing on the surface or struggling, and that's some of the most exciting thing to me, and one of the most exciting things in inshore fishing in South Carolina is seeing a redfish come up 5 times and try to roll upside down and take that bait, or a trout knock it up out of the water. So yeah, Simon and I both share that love of topwater baits, I think. Joey, any questions about the hard baits?
This might not be specifically hard baits,
Sure.
but you mentioned a spray that you spray on your bait.
I did mention ProCure. It's not a spray, it's a gel. It's got a thick viscosity to it. I don't do anything with the spray. Gulp actually does make a spray, and they just kind of attend it to their baits. I use the Procure. Where's that? I had it. It's right in front of me. I use the Procure because it adheres to the bait. You can cast it 3 or 4 times, and you can still see that purplish color on the bait from the Procure. So no sprays, just this gel. Like I said, they make it every flavor of the rainbow. Super happy I don't leave home without this on a fishing trip. I think there's 3 bottles in my tackle box.
And you use that on your artificials?
I use it strictly on the Z-Man. The Gulp's already flavored. If you go to different areas up north a little bit, like North Carolina, they'll actually put it on hard baits in North Carolina, which blows my mind. I don't understand how it adheres to it. They swear by it. So it's definitely something that's used up and down the coast from North Carolina to Florida.
Thank you.
All right. So the last thing we really just wanted to cover was just some basics that you need to have with you when you're fishing, whether you're fishing from shore or on a boat. You know, there's a handful of things. You absolutely need to have a pair of pliers at all times. And I'll let Simon was going to mention a little bit about pliers, but I'll let him do that in just a moment. The other thing, I like to carry either a pair of scissors or some small nail clippers, because a lot of times your pliers, even if they start off really sharp, they're going to have a difficult time cutting braid. So find that fingernail clippers are cheap. They work pretty well on braid. A pair of scissors works really well on braid. Up in the top right here, you see a terrible picture of a landing net. We prefer that people use rubber-coated landing nets. They're less likely for you to get tangled up in, but they're also really good on that fish's slime coat. They're very effective. If you're going to net the fish and then release it, that rubber-coated net is going to do the best for the fish and give it the best chance of surviving and swimming off and being caught another day. A couple other things on here. Down in the bottom middle, you've got a lip gripping tool. This one's a boga grip. That's kind of an alternative to a landing net. You know, for reds and certain fish, you can get down there, grab that fish by the jaws. You don't even need to take it out of the water. You can take your pictures in the water with it. If you are keeping a fish, it's got a scale on that. So that's a nice tool to have, but not a necessity. Obviously in South Carolina, coastal South Carolina, you need bug spray and you need sunscreen. So sort of combine those. This one on the right here is a bug spray and sunscreen, but definitely something you need. And then one more thing, I didn't put a picture on here, but you need some way to measure your fish to make sure that you're legal. So if you plan on keeping any fish at all, need to have either a fish board, one of our DNR fish rulers, a measuring tape, something so that you can measure those fish. Simon, was there anything else that you think that?
Yeah, I'll mention a few items. You talk about the pliers. Everybody always comes in and says, Simon, I've got a pair of aluminum pliers. I keep bending them out. One thing that's been awesome in the past couple of years is Penn put out a pair of pliers. They put out these guys that are coated and they hold up really well and they're not outrageously expensive. If you're fishing 100 days a year, it makes sense to go get a pair of $200 titanium pliers because you're using them every day. It's your tools of your trade. But if you're just everyday fishing, these Penn pliers, they're only $35 and they hold up really, really well. Matt mentioned scissors. Cuda makes a cool little pair of scissors. They're like $3 or $4. They're pretty corrosion resistant. These are cool little tools to keep on. And Matt mentioned the rubber coated landing nets. Get a rubber coated landing net. All you got to do is go fishing once with a rubber coated landing net, and it will save time and effort because it doesn't get tangled up with your line, especially if you're fishing braided line. The hooks don't get hung in as bad. But yeah, I mean, he's got a great list there. Scissors, a nice pair of pliers that holds up really well, and a rubber coated landing net would be something that you just got to have.
All right. So I think we're through most of the main stuff there. And so we just want to see, Joey, did you have any sort of general questions or any questions that we have not answered so far?
Yeah, we have a couple questions here. question about our stickers, which I'm going to answer on my own. And then a question, deep hookers, question mark, for deeper hooked fish, question mark. And I think maybe this is asking about when a fish gets gut hooked, what is the best thing to do?
If you can't get, if it's not in a situation where you can get it out super easily, it's almost always the right thing to cut that hook as close down to the eye as you can and let that get that fish back in the water as soon as possible. If you spend time trying to wrench that thing out, you're gonna tear things, you're gonna cause bleeding. Something like a red drum that actually does swallow a bait, they're surprisingly tough. So the best thing you can do for it is cut it off. You're already using non-stainless hooks, I'm sure, and so they're going to rust that out. Their body's got a way of ejecting that hook out. So just get down there and cut it as close as you can. Carry some extra hooks with you and retie that rig.
Okay, and we've got someone asking about, and this is probably a great question for Matt here. What's your go-to bait / rig for flounder?
If I was just fishing, if I'm fishing live bait, if I just said, you said, Matt, you've got to go out and catch a flounder, I'm going to fish that Jig Head, 20-pound fluorocarbon leader, probably about, 2 to 3 feet of leader. Depending, Jig Head, depending on where you're fishing and how much weight you need, but, most of the time something around 1/4 ounce. And then if I can find a giant mud, catching huge mud minnows, that's really difficult to beat. This time of year, you can get a lot of, 4-inch mullet that are very lively, that you can catch in the cast net. I'm going to work that along the bottom. And that's something that you can, that rig right there, you have a lot of control over. When you can feel that little stop, and that's the point where you need to let that fish eat it for a little bit before you set the hook. As far as artificials, some of those pearl colored soft plastics that Simon mentioned, that pearl or white is a really good color for flounder. A big chunky soft plastic on the jig head works very well. I've probably caught more flounder, as far as artificials, I've caught more on a jig head and a 3-inch new penny Gulp Shrimp probably than any other artificial. But Simon, you may have some that you recommend. I don't know.
Yeah, I like a monster finger mullet, and you just got to be patient. And you feel that fish eat, you can't rip it out of his mouth. You got to let him eat it. But I like the largest finger mullet. People laugh. I've put a 5-inch finger mullet on a hook before. Their mouths are huge. Put your fist in their mouth. But yeah, the nicest flounder I've seen caught this year, one of the local charter captains was fishing live shrimp, and they caught a 14-pound flounder. They ate live shrimp, and I never said to do that. If I wouldn't have saw the pictures and seen it on a scale, I wouldn't say it was real. But
I've seen that fish too, right? It was it was a kid, right?
It was a kid, yeah, on a charter.
Yeah.
In the Charleston Harbor, so it wasn't in a top secret spot. I mean, it was within 5 miles of the shop. So it's pretty wild. We have an awesome fisher here in Charleston.
I would be remiss if I didn't say that our flounder population is a little down from where it has been in previous years. So, be smart out there. Only keep what you need to eat. And hopefully we're gonna see this flounder population really rebound into where it's just a world-class fishery. Joey?
A couple other questions I think we could touch on real quick. Is using treble hooks versus circle hooks for a popping cork?
You want that?
I don't use a lot of treble hooks for anything. I tend to do just fine for sure. A treble hook will catch a trout's mouth, and you're probably not going to lose it. It also, you're dealing with a lot more tearing. A lot more injury to the fish. If you have any sense that you're going to release some of those fish, I prefer even a small J hook to a treble hook, but a small circle hook, especially for trout that have got a soft mouth. You see 2 or 3 of those trebles get caught into a sea trout's mouth, it can really do some tearing and some damage. But tend to, so, you know, as long as you're actively fishing that rig and you're not ripping it out of this mouth, you know, that popping cork, if you just give it, the way a trout will come up and eat, they come up and they ambush and they grab it, and a lot of times they'll turn away right then. You know, I've seen them in tanks do it a ton. And so if you just lift that rod tip right there, for the most part, you're gonna hook that fish without that treble hook. You're gonna put less stress on the fish's mouth, keep some pressure on it, and you're gonna get it in. So I would recommend a J or a circle over that treble hook.
And then, interesting question here that I don't know the answer to. Squid has always worked for me in North Carolina and Maryland. Why not in South Carolina?
You on that one, Simon?
I'll chat about some squid. We do have squid in our waterway. We do. I catch them in a cast net every single year, and we're cast netting for shrimp or for some finger mullet. I'm not going to say it doesn't work. I would much rather have that mud minnow in place, but whenever we talk about taking the kids fishing or just bending a rod, I think that squid is so easy to grab and rip off a hook. That's probably why it's a touch less successful. But in that same idea where you're using that squid not having success, if you're not getting any bites with squid on the hook, I'm not sure if that pushes to the question. If you're not getting any bites, then I would probably move. But if you substitute out some of those mud minnows for that squid, that's what I would probably do. But squid's a great way to bend a rod, but it doesn't really. I've personally never caught any redfish, trout, or flounder on squid, but I'm also focusing a little bit differently.
I think if I was going to go dead bait, you know, a piece of cut shrimp to me is more effective in South Carolina than a piece of cut squid for the most part.
I'd agree with you.
All right, and final question, which, excuse me if this was touched upon earlier in the webinar, dealing with reading through the questions, I wasn't able to listen to exactly everything. I am just getting started with saltwater fishing. Are there any rods and reels that you would recommend?
Can we grab that, Matt?
Yeah, absolutely.
So on our end, we talk about what kind of rod and reel you focus on, and it always depends on your kind of budget on what you're looking for. A great starter combo and one that we see do really well with is that 7-foot medium fast that we started the conversation with. I grabbed that Triumph, that St. Croix Triumph, just because it's a great functional rod. Also, they make a series called the Bass X. Shimano makes a rod called a Terramar that does a great job that falls into that, and these are all $100 price point rods. And then Star makes a rod called a Stellar Light. So that's 4 rods to choose from St. Croix and Shimano and St. Croix. And then on the reel side, we always a $100 reel. There's a great $100 reel starting points. A Daiwa BG is a great reel to start with. A Shimano Noski is a great reel to start with, and a Pin Battle or a Pin Conflict. That kind of gives you 3 different pairings, and we have all those in the shop most of the time. I think we're a little low on inventory with all the craziness going on. But I've personally fished all of those reels. Fish the rods too. Those would be some great options. I'll give everybody my email address if they have any questions about tackle or how to route it. And I'm sure Matt is listed on the website, or if Joey can list it. If you can't list it, then I can read that out or hold my business card up or something of that nature.
So we'll send out an email to everybody who registered for this webinar. We'll give them opportunity if they wanted to rewatch this. You know, the video will be posted. I'm also going to put together a little bit of an inventory list of some of the things we talked about, some terminal tackle, some of the different types of artificial. I'll include your email in there so that if folks want to go back and find some of these things, you know, you don't have to be furiously writing it down right now. We'll send out an email to you. Simon, you did mention rods. I don't know if I want to broach this subject or not, but can you talk about maybe the benefits of buying something that has at least some sort of warranty?
Yeah, so I'm super careful when I mention warranty because there has been manufacturers in the past have a lifetime warranty versus a 1-year warranty versus a 5-year warranty. I grab the St. Croix rods. It's just something I'm used to fishing with. Almost every, well, not almost every rod, every single rod we have in the shop has some sort of manufacturer warranty. If a fishing rod's going to break, not saying they don't break outside of this, but typically if it's going to break because of a manufacturer defect or it got dinged in shipping, it's usually the first time out. I've quickly learned in my years at the tackle shop that the nicer the rod, sometimes the easier it is to break. All these rods are measured off of a 45% drag threshold. So if I'm talking crazy, somebody can like shoot me an email about that too. But the angle of the rod is important. So when I say 45, we're going to be somewhere right here. If you're at the boat and you lift the rod to here, almost every single rod I have on these racks in here are probably going to break if you put a ton of pressure on it. So
Don't
you see
do that.
the bass slinging fish in the boat. I'm not saying those guys are professionals. I don't know how they don't break rods. But it just happens. But all of these rods in here have warranties on them. I don't necessarily sell a rod based on warranty. There's some great rods that have a 1-year warranty. There's some great rods that have a lifetime warranty. But a lot of that's direct with the manufacturer when it comes to a warranty basis. The nicer the rod, the better feel it has. So it's not necessarily keyed in for that live bait fishery. But a lot of artificial rods are going to be your nicer quality rods. Not saying that you can't throw live bait with an artificial rod, but a lot of times if you're shooting for that finesse, super light bite when it's 30 degrees outside and a lot of people don't want to go fishing, then that Terramar or maybe not the Triumph still has a pretty good feel to it, but some of those lesser expensive rods are going to be harder to fill those bites with.
I just sort of brought up the warranty thing because, and you guys don't sell the sort of very entry level. There's something that, you know, when people ask what's the difference between a $20 rod and a $100 rod is, you know, you get features and you get into if you break that rod in the door as you're going out, then, you know, a lot of times you are covered on a warranty that as you get into more expensive rods.
Yeah, so every single one of my rods in house that's $100 has some sort of warranty on it. But for the most part, most of the stuff in here, except like your basis of your base, your $30 to $50 combos that are literally, I'm here for the weekend, I want to go fishing, I need a fishing rod. Nobody runs fishing rods. So you're very correct on that. Those things, they have a warranty, but there's going to be some gray area if you buy $30 and it breaks 2 weeks out.
Yep. Anything else, Joey?
That should be it. We have a comment that I enjoy, asking if there will be a surf fishing webinar coming up soon. And I think that's definitely something in the works, right, Matt?
Yeah, I think that's a natural progression of this series. We'll definitely cover some surf fishing at some point.
And then we have everybody just thanking us.
I wanted to take a moment real quick just to say, you know, when you guys are going out and you're fishing for fishing tackle, not just Hadrill's Point, but go to your local tackle shops, no matter where you are in South Carolina. You're not going to be able to go into the big box store and get people to actually answer your questions and give you any expertise. So that's what you get when you support your local tackle shops. Simon, you want to just tell them where you guys are real quick?
Yeah, for sure. So we have 2 locations. Our Mount Pleasant store has been there for a lot of years. They're in Mount Pleasant off of Coleman Boulevard. We're 526 dead ends into Coleman. And then I'm the manager at the West Ashley location. And we're on your way to Folly Beach on the right-hand side. As soon as you take a right or left off Savannah Highway onto Folly Road in the Earth Fair Shopping Center. And I also wanted to take the time to say thank you to everybody that took the time. I know it's a little bit different with social distancing and first time I've had my mask off all day long. It's kind of cool to breathe without a mask on, but I understand why they're there. But thanks everybody for showing up tonight.
Thanks, Simon. Joey, you want to wrap it up?
Yes, I will wrap it up. Real quickly though, with the help of you, Matt, since I actually don't remember where, we have someone asking where the other past webinars, where are they available? Where do we find them?
That's an excellent question that I'm going to find out the answer to, and we will include that when we send out that email to everybody who registered for this one. We'll make a note of that right now. because I'm not exactly sure, but we need to make sure. There's a whole series of them, not just fishing, but natural resources related, all sorts of topics. So I'll find out the answer to that, and we'll stick it in that email that we send out to everybody.
Awesome. And I think with that, we will say goodbye.
All right.
Thanks everybody for joining us.
Thank y'all.